My caretaker pulled me aside one morning and said, "Mr. Holt, I need to tell you something about your son. He's planning something. I've seen things, and I'm scared for you." I looked at this woman, a woman I'd known for 3 months, a woman my son had hired to help me after my wife passed, and I said, "Grace, that's my son. He's not planning anything. He's just looking out for me." She shook her head slowly. "No, sir, he's not looking out for you. He's looking at what you have. And the papers I found in his briefcase prove it." I didn't believe her. Not because Grace wasn't trustworthy, but because believing her meant accepting that my own son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd coached in Little League, the boy who cried at his mother's funeral, was plotting to take everything I had. So I dismissed her. I told her she'd misunderstood. I told her to focus on her job and stop worrying. And for 2 more weeks, I lived in the comfortable lie that my son loved me more than he loved my money. Then I saw the papers myself, and the comfortable lie burned to the ground. Before we go any further, thank you for being here today. If this story has caught your attention, take a second and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It truly helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these stories. And a gentle reminder, while this story carries real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. The truth behind this message is what matters. Stay with me on this one. My name is Donald Holt. I'm 66 years old. I live in a house on Magnolia Lane in Mobile, Alabama, a 3-bedroom ranch that my wife Bev and I bought in 1995. It's nothing fancy. Brick exterior, small yard, a carport that leans slightly to the left because I built it myself, and I'm better at some things than others. But it's been home for 30 years, and Bev's touches are everywhere. The yellow curtains in the kitchen, the bird feeder by the back window, the vegetable garden along the south fence that she tended every single morning of every single year until the morning she couldn't. Bev. Beverly Ann Holt, born Beverly Thibodeau, died on January 8, 2023. Heart failure. She'd had a bad heart since her late 50s. The doctors managed it with medication for years, but hearts have their own timeline, and Bev's clock ran out on a Sunday morning while she was sitting in her chair by the window, watching the cardinals at the feeder. I found her. She looked peaceful, like she'd just decided to stop. No struggle, no pain. Just a woman who'd spent 62 years being strong for everyone else and finally let go. Her coffee was still warm on the side table. The bird feeder was full. She'd filled it that morning. Her last act on earth was feeding the cardinals. That detail stayed with me. It still stays with me. Of all the ways to spend your last morning, she spent hers taking care of something small and alive. I sat beside her for 40 minutes before I called 911. I knew she was gone. I knew there was nothing they could do. But for 40 minutes, I sat in the chair next to her and held her hand and watched the cardinals she'd just fed. And I told her things I should have said more often. That I loved her. That she was the best thing that ever happened to me. That I was sorry for all the years I spent on the road instead of on the porch beside her. That the yellow curtains were perfect. That everything she'd built was perfect. She didn't hear any of it, but I needed to say it anyway. Bev was the organizer of our life. She paid the bills, she managed the savings. She kept track of every policy, every account, every document. She filed our taxes. She negotiated with contractors. She once called the cable company and argued them into a rate reduction that saved us $600 a year. She did all of this while working full-time as an office manager at a dental practice, raising a son, maintaining a house, and managing a heart condition that should have slowed her down, but never did. When she died, I discovered that she'd built something I never fully appreciated. A financial structure so solid that a man who'd spent his career driving a truck could live comfortably for the rest of his life. I drove long haul for Gulf Coast Freight for 31 years. Started when I was 23, retired at 60. The work was hard, weeks away from home, sleeping in the cab, eating at truck stops, watching the highway unspool in front of me like a gray ribbon never ended. I drove through 38 states, a million miles of asphalt, storms that turned the windshield into a waterfall, and loneliness that sat in the passenger seat like a second driver. But it paid well. Gulf Coast had good benefits, a solid pension plan, and a union that fought for every dollar. Bev made every one of those dollars count. She was the daughter of Cajun shrimpers from Houma, Louisiana. She grew up watching her parents stretch a modest income across a family of 6, and she inherited their understanding that money isn't made in the earning, it's made in the keeping. While I was on the road, she was building, investing, planning, creating a safety net so wide and strong that when I finally came home for good, we could rest on it together. Between my pension, our savings, Bev's life insurance, and the house equity, we were sitting on close to $800,000 in total assets. I didn't know the exact number until after Bev died, and our lawyer, a man named Curtis Tran, sat me down and walked me through it. "Mr. Holt, you're in excellent financial shape. Beverly managed everything with remarkable precision. The house is paid off, your pension covers your monthly expenses, the savings and investment accounts are well diversified, and her life insurance, $200,000, has already been processed." Bev did all that? Every bit of it. She came to see me every year to review and update everything. She was the most organized client I've ever had. She also created a trust, the Beverly Holt Protection Trust. The house, the savings, the insurance, it all flows through the trust. You're the sole trustee. No one can access any of it without your personal, notarized consent given in my presence. Why did she set it up that way? Curtis paused, choosing his words carefully. She said she wanted to make sure you were protected. She didn't specify from whom, but she was very particular about the consent requirements. I didn't understand then why Bev had built those walls. I thought it was just Bev being Bev, thorough, cautious, prepared for every contingency. It wasn't until later that I realized she'd built those walls because she knew exactly who might try to climb over them. I have one son, Nathan, born 1994. Nathan is 31 years old, and for the first 28 years of his life, I would have told you he was a good man, steady, responsible. The kind of son who calls on Sundays and shows up when it matters. Nathan works as a real estate appraiser in Mobile. He knows property values, market trends, the financial anatomy of houses and buildings and land. He got the job through a connection of Bev's. She'd known a woman at the appraisal firm through the dental practice, and he was good at it. He had Bev's eye for detail and my stubbornness about getting things right. Growing up, Nathan and I had a good relationship, though distance shaped it more than I'd like to admit. I was on the road for weeks at a time during his childhood. Bev raised him day to day. She was the one who helped with homework, attended parent-teacher conferences, drove him to baseball practice. I was the father who came home every few weeks with a truck stop souvenir and a guilty conscience. When I was home, I tried to make it count. I coached his Little League team when I could. I taught him to fish in the Gulf. I took him to Saints games in New Orleans, 3-hour drive each way, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing the way fathers and sons do when the highway is long and the conversation has nowhere to go but deeper. Nathan seemed to admire me when he was young. He told a teacher in 3rd grade that his dad was a highway explorer, which made Bev laugh until she cried. He'd ask me about the places I'd been, the things I'd seen, the stories from the road. I was his father, the adventurer, the man who went out into the world and came back with tales. But somewhere in his teenage years, the admiration shifted. Nathan started to see my career differently, not as adventure, but as absence. Not as providing, but as leaving. He didn't say it directly. Nathan was never direct about his feelings. But I could see it in the way he stopped asking about my trips, in the way he started answering my phone calls with one-word responses, in the way he looked at the house, at Bev managing everything alone, and drew a conclusion about me that I couldn't argue with. I'd been gone. For 31 years, I'd been gone more than I'd been present. And my son had noticed. Bev saw the distance growing between us. She tried to bridge it. Nathan's just finding himself, Donald. He'll come back. But the distance hardened into something permanent. Not hostility, not resentment. Just a cool, professional relationship where Nathan treated me with the same courteous efficiency he brought to his appraisal reports. Accurate, thorough, emotionally attached. Nathan married Danielle Brooks in 2020. Danielle was a dental hygienist. She'd worked at the practice where Bev was office manager, which is how Nathan met her. She was pleasant enough. Quiet. She deferred to Nathan on everything. Money, decisions, plans, what to order at restaurants. Bev noticed this. She mentioned it once, carefully, during one of our evening porch conversations.
Donald, Danielle doesn't seem to have her own opinions. She just agrees with whatever Nathan says. Maybe she just trusts him. Maybe. Or maybe she doesn't feel safe disagreeing. There's a difference between trust and compliance, and I can't tell which one I'm seeing. I didn't explore that comment further. I should have. Bev had spent 28 years working in a dental office, watching the dynamics between dentists and assistants, between practice owners and staff, between people with power and people without it. She could read the politics of a relationship the way Nathan could read the value of a property, quickly, accurately, and without sentimentality. After Bev died, Nathan was attentive. He came by every other day. He helped me sort through Bev's things. He sat with me when the grief got heavy. He drove me to the bank to handle the insurance paperwork. He brought Danielle, who cleaned the house and made casseroles that all tasted the same, but were made with genuine effort. He was the son I'd always known, present, caring, solid. But there were moments, small moments that I dismissed because grief makes you grateful for any kindness, even kindness that comes with an agenda. Nathan asked about the house 3 days after the funeral. "Dad, this place is a lot for one person. Are you sure you don't want to think about your options?" "Not now, Nathan." I know. I'm thinking ahead, that's all. 2 weeks later, he asked again.
"Dad, have you thought about what you want to do with the house long term?"
I want to live in it.
"Of course, but what about 5 years from now, 10? The maintenance alone..."
Nathan, your mother and I maintained this house for 30 years. I think I can handle it. He backed off, but the questions kept coming. Every visit wrapped in different packaging but always arriving at the same destination. Sell the house, liquidate the asset, convert brick and wood and 30 years of memories into cash. And then he started asking about the money. "Dad, do you know which bank Mom used for the savings accounts?" First National, why?
"Just making sure you have access to everything. You know, in case you need it."
I have access. Curtis set it all up.
Right, Curtis. Something in Nathan's voice when he said Curtis's name. A tightness, an edge. like the name of my lawyer was an obstacle rather than a protection.
Dad, have you thought about moving your accounts to a bank with better rates? I know a financial advisor who could. Nathan, your mother managed our money for 36 years. She had it exactly where she wanted it. I'm not moving anything. I'm just trying to help. I know, but I don't need that kind of help. Each conversation ended the same way. Nathan retreating with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and me feeling vaguely unsettled without understanding why. My neighbor James Caldwell noticed it before I did. James had lived next door for 18 years. He was a retired firefighter, the kind of man who paid attention to things because his career had trained him to spot danger before it announced itself. "Donald, how often is Nathan coming by these days?" "Every other day, sometimes more. He's spending a lot of time in the house. I've seen him walking through rooms, looking at walls, checking the foundation."
He's an appraiser. He does that.
"He's appraising your house, Donald. There's a difference between a son checking on his dad and a professional evaluating a property." I told James he was reading too much into it, but his words sat in the back of my mind like a splinter. Too small to see, too sharp to ignore. About 2 months after Bev's death, Nathan proposed the caretaker idea. "Dad, I worry about you being alone. What if something happens? What if you fall? What if you need help with something and nobody's here?" "James is next door. I've got friends. I'm not helpless." "I know. But Mom took care of a lot of things you might not realize. The cooking, the cleaning, the medication schedule, the appointments. Let me find someone who can help a few days a week, just to take the edge off." I resisted at first. I didn't want a stranger in my house. Bev's house. The house where every room still smelled like her, the lavender hand cream, the coffee she brewed at 5:30 every morning, the particular scent of a woman who had been part of a space for so long that the space had absorbed her. But Nathan was persistent, and the truth was that the house felt enormous without Bev. The silence had texture. It pressed against the walls like something alive. The bed was too wide. The kitchen was too quiet. The porch chair where she'd watched the Cardinals sat empty, and every time I walked past it, I felt the absence like a missing tooth, a gap your tongue keeps finding even though you know nothing's there. "Okay," I said finally. "A few days a week. But I'm not an invalid, Nathan. I'm grieving. There's a difference." "Of course, Dad. It's just support. I'll handle everything, the agency, the paperwork, the cost. You won't have to worry about any of it." That should have been my first real warning. Nathan offering to pay for something without being asked. Nathan handling paperwork without being prompted. Nathan being helpful in a way that was too thorough, too organized, too much like a project being managed rather than a father being cared for. But I missed it. Because grief makes you stupid. Grief makes you grateful for any hand that reaches out, even if that hand has plans you can't see. Grace Mendoza arrived on a Monday morning in late March. She was 38 years old, small and efficient, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that noticed things the way a bird notices movement, quickly, completely, without looking like she was trying. She was born in Manila, came to the United States when she was 23, and had worked as a caretaker for 6 families over 15 years. She'd cared for elderly clients in Pensacola, Mobile, and Gulf Shores. She had references that Curtis later verified, all glowing, all genuine. She was qualified, experienced, and real. "Mr. Holt, I'm here to help, not to take over. You tell me what you need and what you don't need, and we'll figure it out together." "I need coffee in the morning and someone to argue with. My wife used to do both." Grace smiled, the kind of smile that changes a room. "I can manage the coffee. The arguing we'll see." For the first 2 months, Grace was exactly what Nathan had promised: helpful, unobtrusive, respectful.
She cooked simple meals that were better than anything I'd been eating since Bev died. She kept the house clean without rearranging things. She understood instinctively that Bev's organizational system was sacred and not to be touched. She drove me to doctor's appointments and waited in the lobby reading paperback novels with dog-eared pages. She also noticed things, small things I'd stopped seeing because grief makes you blind to everything except the absence.
Mr. Holt, your blood pressure medication expired in February. Did Mrs. Holt usually manage your prescriptions? She kept a chart on the refrigerator. It had every medication, every dose, every refill date. The chart's still there. It's just not being updated. I'll take over if you'll let me. I'll let you. She updated the chart. She called the pharmacy. She organized my pills into a weekly dispenser labeled with days and times, the way Bev had done. She didn't make a fuss about it. She just did it, quietly, competently, the way Bev had done everything. She found the leak under the kitchen sink that I'd been ignoring for 3 weeks. She noticed that the screen door was hanging crooked and tightened the hinges. She saw that Bev's vegetable garden was dying from neglect and, without asking, started watering it every morning. "Mr. Holt, the tomatoes need staking. Do you have stakes in the shed?" Bev kept them in the corner behind the lawnmower. I found them. I hope you don't mind. I staked the tomatoes and added some fertilizer. Mrs. Holt's garden was too good to let go. I stood at the kitchen window and watched this woman, this stranger who'd been in my house for 3 weeks, kneeling in my wife's garden, tending my wife's tomatoes, honoring my wife's work. And I felt something I hadn't felt since January. Gratitude that didn't hurt. Grace and I developed a routine. Coffee on the porch at 7 a.m. She'd cook breakfast while I read the paper. She'd handle the house while I worked in the yard or watched television or did the nothing that grief requires you to do. In the evenings, if she was still there, we'd sit on the porch and she'd tell me about her life. Growing up in Manila, the journey to America, the families she'd cared for, the things she'd learned. "My first client was a retired judge in Pensacola," she told me one evening. "Judge Clarence Watkins. He was 84 years old and sharp as a tack. He taught me more about American law in 2 years than most people learn in a lifetime." What did he teach you? The documentation is everything. He used to say, "Grace, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And if it did happen but isn't written down, no one will believe you." He made me keep a daily log of everything, his medications, his visitors, his meals, his vital signs. He said the log was my protection and his. Protection from what? Grace was quiet for a moment. His children. They wanted his money. They came to the house with lawyers and accountants, and Judge Watkins would pull out my logs and show them every detail of his daily life, documented in black and white. He said, as long as Grace writes it down, they can't claim I'm incompetent. The record speaks for itself. Smart man. The smartest I've ever known, until now. I'm not smart, Grace. My wife was smart. I'm just stubborn. Stubborn is a kind of smart, Mr. Holt. The kind that keeps you alive. I didn't understand then why she was telling me about Judge Watkins and his logs. I understand now. She was planting a seed, preparing me for what she'd already started to see. Because Grace was watching Nathan. She didn't tell me, not yet, but she was watching him the way Judge Watkins had taught her to watch. Carefully, quietly, with a notebook in her apron pocket. Nathan visited twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Each visit followed the same pattern. He'd greet me, ask how I was doing, chat for a few minutes, and then wander. He'd walk through the house with the practiced eye of an appraiser, examining walls, checking fixtures, opening closets he had no reason to open. He checked the foundation from outside. He'd measure rooms. Once, Grace told me later, he measured the carport. Your son measured the carport, Mr. Holt, with a tape measure from his car. He wrote the numbers in a notebook.
He's an appraiser. He measures things. He measures other people's things. This is your house. I brushed it off, but Grace didn't. She started keeping a log, the same kind of log Judge Watkins had taught her to keep. Date, time, Nathan's arrival, which rooms he entered, how long he stayed, what he touched, what he said, what he asked about. The log would become the most important document in the case. Nathan also started visiting during my nap times. I'd go upstairs after lunch, a habit Bev had encouraged because the doctors said rest was important for my blood pressure. And Nathan would arrive 15 minutes later, like clockwork, as if he knew my schedule, as if someone had told him exactly when I'd be asleep. Grace was that someone. Not intentionally, she hadn't given Nathan my nap schedule. But Nathan asked casually during one of his visits, "Grace, what time does Dad usually rest?" "After lunch, around 1. "How long?" An hour or so. Grace told me later that she'd answered without thinking. It wasn't until she saw Nathan arriving at 1:15, going straight to my study, and closing the door that she realized what she'd done.
"I gave him your schedule, Mr. Holt. I'm so sorry. He asked, and I answered, and I didn't think about why he was asking."
What did he do in the study? I don't know. The door was closed. He was in there for 20 minutes. When he came out, he was carrying a folder.
"What folder?"
A green folder from your desk. The one Mrs. Holt labeled Insurance and Pension. My blood went cold. That folder contained Bev's life insurance policy, my pension statements, and our investment account summaries. The complete financial picture of everything we'd built. Did he take it? He put it back before he left, but I checked after he was gone. The papers inside were in a different order. Mrs. Holt had a system. Every document was filed chronologically, newest on top. When I checked, the newest document was in the middle. Someone had gone through it and put it back wrong. Grace had noticed because Bev's organizational system was sacred to her. She'd spent 2 months learning it, respecting it, maintaining it. She knew when something was out of place, the same way Bev would have known. That conversation should have been enough. A son going through his father's financial files during nap time should have been a bright red alarm. But I was still in the fog, still believing that Nathan was just being thorough, just being protective, just being the son who worried about his father. Grace didn't push. She went back to the kitchen. She wrote in her log, and she waited. The next piece came a week later. Nathan visited on a Saturday while I was in the yard. Grace was inside. Nathan thought I was out of earshot. He was in the kitchen on his phone, and he didn't know that Grace was in the laundry room with the door open. "Yeah, I've got the comps ready," Nathan said. 3 comparable sales in the neighborhood, all above $340,000. The property's in good shape. The old man's been maintaining it. Better than I expected. I'd list at $365,000 to start. Maybe go higher if we time the market right and stage it well. Grace stopped folding laundry. She stood perfectly still and listened. "No, he doesn't know yet. I need to get the power of attorney sorted first. Curtis Tran handles his legal stuff. The old guy's been using him for years, but I think I can work around him. Danielle found a lawyer in Pensacola who filed the petition without asking too many questions. Guy named Gruber. He's done this kind of thing before." Pause. "The caretaker's not a problem. She's just a cook and cleaner. She doesn't know anything about the finances. She barely speaks English." Grace clenched her fists. She'd spent 15 years in America. She had perfect English. She'd cared for a retired judge. She kept meticulous logs. She was not just a cook and cleaner. But she stayed silent, because Judge Watkins had taught her something else. Never let them know you're watching. The moment they know, they change their behavior. And changed behavior is harder to document.
Give me 2 months, Nathan continued. I'll have the POA list the house and move him into assisted living before he knows what happened. The house, plus the savings, plus the insurance, we're looking at close to $800,000. After taxes and costs, figure $700K net. Split with Danielle, that's $350K each, enough to clear our debts and put a down payment on the Pensacola condo. He hung up. Grace heard him walk to the study. She heard the door open and close. She heard the sounds of drawers opening, papers rustling, the quiet click of a phone camera. 20 minutes later, Nathan walked out, said goodbye to me in the yard, and drove away. Grace checked the study. 3 folders had been disturbed. The order of documents inside each one had changed. Someone had photographed them. She could see the slight displacement of papers that happens when you lift them to photograph what's underneath. Grace wrote everything in her log. The exact words from the phone call, as close as she could remember. The time, the rooms, the folders, the evidence of photography. She wrote it all down with the precision of a woman who'd learned from a judge that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Then she waited. For 2 more weeks, she watched and documented. Nathan visited 4 more times during my nap. Each time he went to the study. Each time, Grace checked the files afterward and noted the disturbances. She was building a record, a timeline of systematic surveillance conducted by my own son. And then, on a Tuesday morning, she pulled me aside. Mr. Holt, I need to tell you something about your son. This is where the story came in at the beginning. Grace standing in the kitchen, her face serious, her voice low, and me, not ready to hear it. Grace, that's my son. He's not planning anything. He's just looking out for me. Mr. Holt, your son wants to sell your house. He wants power of attorney. He wants to move you to assisted living. He has a lawyer in Pensacola. He told someone on the phone that the total is $800,000, and he plans to split it with his wife. I heard every word, and I've been documenting his visits for a month. She showed me the log, the notebook from her apron pocket, filled with dated entries in small, careful handwriting. Every visit, every room, every folder touched, every document disturbed. And the phone call, Nathan's words transcribed as accurately as Grace could manage. I read the log. I read every entry. And the comfortable lie, the belief that my son loved me more than my money, crumbled like a house built on sand. I sat down at the kitchen table, the table where Bev and I had eaten 30 years of meals, the table where Nathan had done his homework as a boy, the table where a father was learning that his son was a thief. What else, Grace? There's more. But first, do you believe me now? I looked at her. This woman who'd risked her job, her stability, her livelihood, to tell a stubborn old man the truth about his own child. I believe you, and I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. You're a father, Mr. Holt. Fathers don't want to believe this. That's what makes it work. I called Curtis Tran that afternoon. When I told him what Grace had documented and what she'd overheard, Curtis went quiet for a long time. Donald, this is serious. If Nathan is preparing a power of attorney petition through a compromised lawyer, and if he's systematically copying your financial documents, we're looking at attempted financial exploitation, fraud, invasion of privacy, and potential elder abuse. He's my son, Curtis. I know. And I'm sorry. But Beverly built that trust specifically for this scenario. She never told me explicitly who she was protecting you from, but the provisions she included, the requirement for your personal, notarized consent in my presence, those aren't standard. Those are walls built against someone specific.
You think Bev knew?
I think Beverly saw patterns that you didn't see. She spent 36 years managing finances and watching people. She knew what money does to families, and she made sure you'd be protected.
Curtis laid out a plan with the same methodical precision that Bev would have used.
Step 1. Install hidden cameras in the study. Legal in my own home under Alabama law. Small, wireless, motion-activated. Curtis provided the equipment. Step 2. Grace continues her log. Every visit documented. Every room, every file, every movement tracked with the precision of a medical chart. Step 3. Change nothing. Let Nathan continue his surveillance. Let him believe he's operating undetected. Every action he takes on camera strengthens the case.
Step 4. Wait for Nathan to make an overt move.
To present documents, to request signatures, to take any action that demonstrates criminal intent beyond preparation. When he makes that move, Curtis said, we close the trap. I installed the cameras on a Saturday when Nathan was out of town. James, next door, helped me. I told him I wanted security cameras because I'd been feeling nervous alone in the house. He didn't question it. He spent the afternoon running wires and mounting small cameras that looked like smoke detectors. I didn't tell James about Nathan, not yet. I needed everyone to be genuine. If James started behaving differently around Nathan, avoiding him, watching him, acting cold, Nathan would notice. And Nathan was an appraiser. He was trained to notice things that were off.
Grace continued her log. But now she also had the cameras backing her up.
Night after night, the cameras captured Nathan during his nap-time visits. He'd let himself in with the key I'd given him years ago. He'd go straight to the study. He'd open drawers, remove folders, photograph documents with his phone. He'd check my computer. He'd figured out my password by looking over my shoulder during a previous visit. He'd photograph bank statements, investment summaries, the trust documents Bev had created. Then he'd put everything back. Not perfectly. Grace could always tell, but close enough that a man who wasn't looking wouldn't notice. The cameras captured 11 separate incidents over 3 weeks. Curtis cataloged every one. Meanwhile, Grace did something extraordinary. She started befriending Danielle. Not aggressively. Grace was too subtle for that. She'd make conversation when Danielle came to the house with Nathan. She'd ask about Danielle's work, her hobbies, her plans. She'd offer coffee, share recipes, build the kind of casual rapport that makes people lower their guard.
And Danielle, who'd spent years deferring to Nathan, who'd spent years being quiet and compliant, started talking. Small things at first, then bigger things.
Nathan's been stressed lately. He says the real estate market is tough. Nathan and I are looking at a condo in Pensacola. It's a stretch, but Nathan says we'll manage. Nathan's been doing some consulting work, estate planning stuff. He says it could be really lucrative.
Each comment was a brick in the case. Nathan wasn't doing consulting work. He was planning to steal from me. The Pensacola condo wasn't a stretch. It was being funded by my assets. And the tough real estate market wasn't the source of his stress. The timeline for stealing from his father was. Grace wrote it all in the log. Every comment, every slip, every accidental revelation from a wife who didn't know she was building a case against her own husband. 5 weeks after the cameras were installed, Nathan made his move. He arrived on a Saturday with a folder, clean clothes, confident posture, the practiced composure of a man who'd rehearsed what he was about to say. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about your situation. You're 66. You're alone. The house is a lot of work, and managing finances at this level, the pension, the savings, the insurance, the investments, it's a big responsibility. I have Curtis for that."
Curtis is a lawyer, not a financial manager. What you need is someone who understands your full picture. Someone who can make decisions quickly if something happens to you. Someone in the family.
What are you suggesting? Nathan opened the folder. Legal documents. Power of attorney forms. I recognized them from what Curtis had described.
I've had these drawn up by a lawyer, Martin Gruber, in Pensacola. He specializes in estate management. It's a durable power of attorney. Gives me the authority to act on your behalf for financial and medical decisions. It's standard, Dad. Lots of families do this. Did Curtis prepare these? No. Curtis is... Look, no offense to Curtis, but he's old-fashioned. He's protective in ways that aren't practical. Gruber understands modern estate management. I looked at the documents. I looked at my son. The boy from Little League. The man with the practiced smile. And I made a decision that went against every instinct I had as a father.
I'll think about it, I said. Nathan's surprise was visible. He'd prepared for resistance. My acquiescence threw him.
Really? That's great, Dad. Take your time, read through everything.
Give me a few days. Of course, it's not urgent. It was urgent for him.
Every day I didn't sign was another day his plan stalled. But he had to play the patient, concerned son. He couldn't show the hunger. Nathan left. I took the documents to Curtis the same afternoon. Curtis reviewed them with the focus of a man who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Donald, these documents are designed to give Nathan unrestricted control over your finances, your property, and your medical decisions. The language is far broader than standard power of attorney. There are no reporting requirements, no oversight provisions, no limitations on transactions. This is a blank check.
And the lawyer? Curtis made calls.
Martin Gruber has been disciplined twice by the Florida bar. Once for preparing fraudulent estate documents for a client whose children were stealing from her. Once for facilitating a property transfer under questionable circumstances. He's not a lawyer. He's a tool. So my son found a dirty lawyer to write documents that would give him everything. Precisely. And now we have the documents as evidence of intent. Curtis filed a report with the Mobile County District Attorney that week. The evidence package was overwhelming. Grace's months of documented observations, the camera footage from the study showing 11 instances of unauthorized access, Danielle's inadvertent admissions, Nathan's phone conversation partially captured by Grace, and the power of attorney documents prepared by a disciplined attorney. But Curtis wanted one more piece, the execution attempt. If we catch him trying to get you to sign with a notary he's arranged in circumstances designed to bypass your legal protections, that's not preparation. That's attempted elder abuse in action. So I called Nathan. I'll sign the papers.
Really, Dad? That's the right decision. You won't regret this.
One condition. Curtis has to be present. He's my lawyer. He needs to witness.
Silence. Curtis was the last person Nathan wanted in the room, but refusing would expose him. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable.
The signing was scheduled for the following Saturday at 10 a.m. Nathan arrived with a notary he'd brought from Pensacola, not the one Curtis had arranged, but someone Nathan had hired. Another control measure. Another sign. Curtis was already at the house. So was Detective Maria Santos from the Mobile County Elder Abuse Task Force. She was in the guest bedroom with a court-authorized audio recording device. James Caldwell was on his porch next door, watching Nathan's arrival, ready to testify as a witness if needed. And Grace was in the kitchen. The same kitchen where she'd heard Nathan call her just a cook and cleaner. The same kitchen where she'd decided to risk everything to protect a man she'd known for 3 months. Nathan spread the documents on the kitchen table. He was smooth, polished. A man who believed he was 15 minutes away from controlling $800,000.
Okay, Dad. Straightforward. Sign here, here, and here. The notary will witness and we're done. Curtis picked up the documents. He read them slowly, deliberately. Nathan, these documents grant you unrestricted authority over your father's financial assets, real property, and medical decisions. There are no reporting requirements, no oversight, no limitations on sale of property or liquidation of accounts. Did you explain that to Donald? It's standard estate planning, Curtis. It's not standard. Standard power of attorney includes safeguards, oversight provisions, and accountability requirements. These have none. These were prepared by Martin Gruber, a lawyer who's been disciplined twice by the Florida bar for facilitating exactly this kind of exploitation. Nathan's face changed. The polished sun cracked. The calculator behind his eyes started spinning. That's irrelevant. The documents are legal. The documents are predatory, and I've advised my client not to sign them. Dad? Nathan looked at me. You said you'd sign. I looked at my son, the boy who hit his first home run and ran so fast his helmet flew off. The man sitting at his mother's table trying to steal everything she'd built. I said I'd sign so you'd come here today, Nathan. With your documents, with your notary, with your whole plan laid out on the table. Nathan went still. The room changed temperature. Curtis has been building a case against you for 2 months. Grace has been documenting your visits since the first week. Every room you entered, every file you touched, every photograph you took with your phone. I have cameras in the study that recorded you accessing my financial documents on 11 separate occasions. And Detective Santos from the Elder Abuse Task Force has been in the next room listening to this entire conversation. The bedroom door opened. Detective Santos walked out, badge visible, audio recorder in hand. Her expression was neutral, professional, the expression of a woman who'd done this before. Nathan looked at the detective, at Curtis, at Grace standing in the kitchen doorway with her notebook in her hand, then at me. Dad, I can explain. You can explain to Detective Santos. I've heard enough explanations. Nathan was arrested in my kitchen, at the table where he'd done his homework, in the house his mother had spent 30 years protecting. Detective Santos read him his rights while he stared at the floor. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. He just went quiet, the way people go quiet when the performance is finally over and there's nothing left to pretend. Danielle was arrested separately that afternoon. Investigators had obtained the text messages and emails between her and Nathan, detailed plans for the house sale, projected proceeds, the Pensacola condo they'd been planning to buy with my money. She cried when they put the handcuffs on. Nathan didn't. The trial took place 4 months later. It lasted 5 days. Mobile County Courthouse, Judge William Teague presiding. Nathan and Danielle were tried together. Their defense attorneys had requested separate trials, but the judge denied the motion, ruling that the conspiracy charges required a joint proceeding. The prosecution's case was presented by Assistant DA Renee Fontaine, a woman in her early 40s who'd spent a decade handling elder abuse cases. She opened with a statement that silenced the courtroom. This case is about a son who looked at his father and saw a bank account. A son who hired a caretaker to spy on his own dad, then went further than even the spy was willing to go. And it's about a woman named Grace Mendoza, who had the courage to say, "This isn't right," when it would have been much easier to look the other way. Grace testified on the second day. She sat in the witness chair with the composure of a woman who'd been preparing for this moment, since Judge Watkins taught her to keep a log. She described everything: the pattern of visits, the files accessed, the phone call she overheard, the disturbed documents, Danielle's inadvertent admissions. She brought her logs, all of them. 4 notebooks filled with dated entries documenting Nathan's behavior over 5 months. The prosecutor walked her through each entry methodically. Ms. Mendoza,
Can you read the entry from April 14th?
April 14th, 1:22 p.m. Nathan arrived. Mr. Holt napping. Nathan went directly to study, closed the door. Stayed 18 minutes. I checked afterward. The green folder labeled Insurance and Pension had been opened. Documents were out of Mrs. Holt's chronological order. Newest document was now in the middle of the stack.
And April 18th?
April 18th, 1:15 p.m. Nathan arrived. Mr. Holt napping. Same pattern. Study, 22 minutes. This time he also accessed Mr. Holt's computer. I could hear the keyboard through the door. When I checked, the browser history had been cleared, but the computer's recent files showed access to a PDF labeled Investment Portfolio Summary. Entry after entry, date after date. A meticulous record of systematic surveillance conducted by a son against his own father. The defense attorney tried to discredit her. Nathan's lawyer, a man from Birmingham named Gerald Crane, approached the witness stand with the practiced confidence of someone who'd broken down witnesses before. Ms. Mendoza, isn't it true that you were terminated from a previous caretaker position for making accusations about a family member?
I was terminated from a position in Gulf Shores because I told the truth about a son who was stealing from his elderly mother. The family fired me for overstepping. 6 months later, the son was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 2 years in prison. I was the key witness for the prosecution. The courtroom went quiet. Gerald Crane paused, shuffled his papers, and tried a different angle.
Ms. Mendoza, you're a foreign national. Is it possible you misunderstood the conversation you claim to have overheard? English isn't your first language. Grace looked at him with an expression that was polite and devastating at the same time.
I've lived in the United States for 15 years. I've cared for a retired federal judge who trusted me to document his daily life in legal quality English. I graduated from a university in Manila where all instruction was in English. And I transcribed Nathan's phone conversation within minutes of hearing it, including his exact words. $800,000, split with Danielle, $350,000 each. I don't believe I misunderstood.
Gerald Crane sat down. Curtis Tran testified on the afternoon of the second day. He described the Beverly Holt Protection Trust, the specific provisions Bev had included, and the significance of the consent requirements she'd insisted on. He described Nathan's attempt to circumvent the trust using a disciplined attorney. He described the power of attorney documents as predatory instruments designed to strip an elderly man of all legal protections. The camera footage was played on the third day. 11 recordings. Each one showing Nathan entering the study during my nap, opening drawers, removing folders, photographing documents with his phone. The footage was clear, time-stamped, and undeniable. The jury watched all 11 recordings. Some of them watched Nathan's face at the defense table while the footage played. He stared at the surface in front of him without blinking. I testified on the afternoon of the third day. I described everything, the escalating pressure about the house, the nap-time visits, the phone call I overheard, the power of attorney documents, and the trap. I described what it felt like to install cameras in my own study to catch my own son. I described the moment Grace warned me, and I didn't believe her. And I described the hardest part, looking at my son across a courtroom and understanding that the boy I'd raised had become someone Bev had seen coming, and I had not. The prosecutor asked me one final question. Mr. Holt, when your caretaker first warned you about your son, why didn't you believe her? Because no father wants to believe his child would steal from him. You'd rather believe a stranger is wrong than believe your son is dangerous.
That's what makes elder abuse so effective. It exploits the one thing parents can't stop doing, which is trusting their children.
And what made you finally believe her?
The same thing that makes me believe everything evidence. Grace didn't just tell me something was wrong. She showed me. She had the dates, the details, the documentation. She had the truth written down in black and white. And, as Judge Watkins taught her, if it's written down, it happened, and no one can pretend it didn't. The defense called Nathan to testify on the fourth day. His lawyer tried to frame the narrative as a misunderstanding, a son who was overzealous in his concern for his father's well-being. Nathan, coached and rehearsed, described himself as worried, proactive, trying to protect a grieving father from financial mistakes. The prosecution's cross-examination dismantled him in 30 minutes. Renee Fontaine presented phone records showing 47 calls to Martin Gruber over a 3-month period. She presented Danielle's text messages discussing the projected proceeds from the house sale, messages that included emojis and exclamation marks that didn't suggest concern for Dad's well-being. She presented Nathan's search history, obtained by warrant, power of attorney without consent, Alabama, how to sell parents' house, assisted living facilities, cheapest, Mobile. And she played one final piece of evidence, a voicemail Nathan had left for Martin Gruber that Curtis had obtained through legal discovery. "Marty, it's Nate. The old man's going to sign. I've got him softened up. Once I have the POA, I'll list the house within the week. Don't worry about the trust. Once I have authority, I can petition to dissolve it. Tran can fight it, but by then the house will be in escrow and the accounts will be transferred. Speed is everything. Call me back." Nathan listened to his own voice. The courtroom listened to his own voice. And whatever remained of the concerned son narrative collapsed completely. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Fraud. Unauthorized access to private financial documents. Conspiracy. Nathan was sentenced to 3.5 years in state prison. Danielle received 18 months of probation, 400 hours of community service, and court-ordered financial counseling. Both were permanently barred from any involvement in my financial or medical affairs. The court also issued a restitution order requiring Nathan to reimburse all legal costs incurred in his prosecution. Judge Teague addressed Nathan directly before sentencing. "Mr. Holt, your mother spent 36 years building a financial foundation for your family. She did this with discipline, with foresight, and with a love for her husband that expressed itself in spreadsheets and trust documents and provisions designed to keep him safe. She built walls around him because she knew what was coming. And what was coming was you." The judge paused. "Your mother was right to be afraid. And the fact that a caretaker, a woman you dismissed as just a cook and cleaner, had to step in and do what a son should have done, that is perhaps the most damning indictment of all." Nathan didn't respond. He stared at the table. Danielle was crying silently beside her lawyer. The courtroom was quiet, except for the sound of the clerk recording the sentence. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Curtis and Grace. It was a warm Alabama afternoon. The magnolias were blooming somewhere nearby. I could smell them, sweet and heavy, the way they always smell in Mobile when the world is being both beautiful and terrible at the same time. "How do you feel?" Curtis asked. "Like a man who just sent his son to prison." "You didn't send him to prison, Donald. He sent himself. You and Grace just made sure the evidence was there."
I looked at Grace. She was standing slightly apart, the way she always did, present but not intrusive. The cook and cleaner, who'd outsmarted my son, documented his crimes, and saved an old man's life without ever raising her voice. Grace, I owe you everything.
You don't owe me anything, Mr. Holt. I did what Mrs. Holt would have done.
You never met Bev.
I didn't need to. I've lived in her house for 5 months. I've cooked in her kitchen, sat in her chair, tended her garden. I've maintained her filing system and her medication chart and her bird feeder. I know exactly who Beverly Holt was, and she would never have let this happen to you.
She was right. Bev would never have let this happen. But Bev was gone, and in her absence, Grace had stepped into the space.
She left, not as a replacement, as a continuation. A woman who protected the people she cared for with the same quiet, fierce, unrelenting precision. In the months after the trial, life on Magnolia Lane settled into something new, something I hadn't expected. Grace stayed. Not as a caretaker, we both agreed that title no longer fit. She moved from the guest bedroom to a small apartment 2 blocks away, but she still came by 4 days a week. We'd have coffee on the porch at 7 a.m., the way we always had. She'd cook breakfast, I'd read the paper. We'd work in Bev's garden together. Grace added a section of herbs this spring, basil and rosemary and cilantro, and the whole backyard smelled like a kitchen. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings and talk. About her family in Manila, about Bev, about the other families she'd cared for, about Judge Watkins, who'd died 2 years ago, but whose lessons were still protecting people he'd never meet. James Caldwell saw it before I did. One evening, sitting on his porch next door, he called over, "Donald, that woman saved your life." "She saved my house. She saved my finances." "No, Donald. She saved your life. Because if Nathan had succeeded, if he'd taken the house and put you in assisted living, you would have been done. Not physically, but that thing inside you that keeps you going, the thing Bev built, the thing Grace protected, that would have died in some facility somewhere while your son spent your money. Grace didn't save your bank account. She saved your reason to get up in the morning." He was right. He was exactly right. Nathan wrote me from prison. His first letter came 3 months after sentencing. It was written on prison stationery, careful and short. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. I'm in counseling here, and the therapist has been asking me to think about when I started seeing you as a resource instead of a father. I think it was when I became an appraiser. I started looking at everything, buildings, properties, relationships, in terms of value, what it was worth, what I could get from it. I looked at your house and saw $365,000. I looked at your accounts and saw $800,000. I stopped seeing you. The man who coached Little League. The man who drove 1,000,000 miles to make sure I had a good life. I stopped seeing that man and started seeing a number. I'm ashamed of that. More ashamed than I've ever been of anything." A second letter came a month later. Longer, more raw. "The therapist asked me to write about Grace, about why I called her just a cook and cleaner. I think I said that because I needed her to be small. I needed her to be invisible. Because if she was a real person, a person with intelligence and perception and courage, then what I was doing became harder to justify. It's easier to steal from your father when the only witness is someone you've decided doesn't matter. Grace mattered. She mattered more than I did. She did the thing I should have done. She protected you. And I hate myself for making that necessary." I read both letters on the porch, in Bev's chair. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in the drawer with Bev's things, the yellow curtain fabric she'd been meaning to replace, the bird-watching journal, the small collection of objects that still smelled like her. I didn't write back. Not yet. Forgiveness is a garden. You can't rush it. You plant the seeds and water them
and wait. And sometimes what grows isn't what you expected. But you have to give it time.
Grace was with me when I read the letter. She didn't ask what it said. She just refilled my coffee and sat in the other porch chair and watched the cardinals at the feeder. The same feeder Bev had filled on her last morning.
Donald?
Grace, I've told you 100 times. Call me Donald.
I know, but old habits are stubborn. Bev used to say that stubborn isn't always a bad thing.
Mrs. Holt was right about most things. She was right about everything, including the things she didn't live long enough to say out loud. Today, it's been 8 months since the trial. The house on Magnolia Lane stands exactly as Bev built it. The yellow curtains in the kitchen, the bird feeder by the back window, the vegetable garden along the south fence, now expanded with Grace's herbs. The carport still leans slightly to the left. I could fix it, but it reminds me that I'm better at some things than others. And that's okay. I still fill the bird feeder every Sunday morning. The cardinals still come. They don't know that the woman who started feeding them is gone. They just know that someone fills the feeder, and that's enough. I started volunteering at the Mobile County Senior Center, working with Curtis and Detective Santos to educate other elderly people about the signs of financial exploitation. We run a workshop once a month. The title, which I chose, is Protecting Yourself from the People You Trust. Grace co-teaches the workshop with me. She brings her notebooks, the logs, the documentation, the evidence of what careful observation can accomplish. She tells the attendees about Judge Watkins, about the power of writing things down, about the difference between paranoia and vigilance. Paranoia is seeing danger everywhere, she tells them. Vigilance is paying attention when something doesn't feel right. Trust your feelings, then document them, because feelings fade, but paper doesn't. The attendees listen. Some of them nod. Some of them cry. Some of them pull Grace aside afterward and tell her things they've been afraid to say out loud, about sons and daughters and in-laws and caretakers who aren't what they seem. Grace listens to all of them, the way she listened to me, the way Judge Watkins taught her to listen, with attention, with compassion, and with a pen in her hand. I'm Donald Holt. I'm 66 years old. My caretaker told me my son was planning something. I didn't believe her until I saw the papers. And when I finally saw the truth, it was Grace, the woman my son called just a cook and cleaner, who saved everything. If someone in your life is trying to tell you something you don't want to hear about your child, your spouse, your family member, listen. The people who warn you are rarely your enemy. The enemy is usually the person they're warning you about. And if you're a caretaker, if you're in someone's home, watching, cooking, cleaning, noticing things that don't feel right, speak up. Even if they don't believe you at first, even if it costs you your job, even if the person you're trying to protect is too stubborn or too loyal or too grief-stricken to hear the truth. Speak up anyway. Because the truth, spoken at the right moment by the right person, can save a life. It saved mine. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about family, truth, and the people who show up when it matters most. Before we close this story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, that's completely okay. Take care of yourselves. But if you stayed until the end, thank you. Bev would have liked you. She always appreciated people who stuck around until the last page. Now, if you'll excuse me, Grace made breakfast, and it smells like home.